just like to find out a little bit about you. So, and your professional life. So could you talk a little bit about,
Well,
what you did and how the book came about?
well, I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and my parents were both from Iowa and Minnesota, so this was always referred to this country as back home. I went to the University of Washington, and then to graduate school. I went east to go to graduate school at Radcliffe, and it turned out that I had 6 months between finishing at the University of Washington and going on to graduate school. So I worked for the Quakers, the American Friends Service Committee, for that 6 months. And in the course of that time, I met an ex-conscientious objector, and he was not a Quaker, neither was I, actually. But we'd both worked with the Quakers, and we're both pacifists, and we got married. But he was working at the University of Pennsylvania and didn't have any particularly good job prospects in Cambridge. So I changed my plans to go to Bryn Mawr College for my master's degree. And that's what I did. And then for a year we went to Mexico to work for the service committee and directing a work camp. And came back because of my husband's parents needing care and attention here in Minnesota. And we settled in Minnesota. My husband got a job for the university here, and unfortunately it was a soft money job that didn't really lead anywhere, but he loved it. It was the balloon project, that these big skyhook balloons with General Mills. And it was very adventurous, and he liked it a lot, but it didn't last very long. But he went on to he was an electrical engineer by training, and we brought up our children here, and I became interested in getting a job, and I have to confess, I tried most of the colleges in the Twin Cities. Most of them weren't interested in talking to a woman who had interrupted her career to have a family. And but there was a job, a temporary job at the Historical Society, so that sounded interesting, and I took that. And before long, it turned into a permanent job, and eventually into a career. And since I really loved history and knew something about this country anyway, since my family had come from here, I made it my life work.
Absolutely. And so what role did you play at the Historical Society?
Well, I started as a part-time research assistant, and that was good because it gave me a grounding in Minnesota history. I was working for a man who was doing a biography of Ignatius Donnelly. And I am interested in politics, always have been, was brought up a radical, and therefore Donnelly was very appealing to me. But he also, the work laid a foundation of early Minnesota history. And so from then I went on, I became editor of the journal Minnesota History for 8 years, edited books for a couple of years, and then decided to edit, a new department had been created. Times were a-changing everywhere, and certainly at the Historical Society. The preservation movement was in full swing. It was increasing in size rapidly. Historic sites were being acquired. They had never had any before the 1950s. Any historic sites like the Sibley House were owned by others. Perhaps they would consult the Historical Society, but it was not a matter of dictating the interpretation or restoration of it. And so that introduced a whole new and much larger operation. And it was a great time to be at an institution like that because there were many new kinds of jobs being offered, and I did a number of different things and still working for the same institution, which was very, very good.
And you must still have been employed at the Historical Society when you began work on this book.
Well, I began work on this book and changed jobs within the Historical Society several times, but most of those jobs included some elements that sort of fed into the story of Henry Sibley, because Sibley's life is really the story of Minnesota from 1834 to 1890. And so it's, I learned a great deal that went into the background of the book, and that is, I think, very important, especially in today's world where the background that we live with is changing so much from what the world he knew that it's hard to make judgments of what kind of person he was, what his attitudes were. It takes a lot of study.